And welcome back to Washington Commanders Insider. Today, we're talking about the defense beefing up and if they're ready to stop the run this season. We're also going to be looking at two young defensive players that could be X factors for the Washington Commanders that could really help them stop the run this year. And so before we jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, just like Jaden Daniels is going to be hitting Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Zach Ertz, Jalen Lane, and many others for multiple touchdowns this upcoming season. And so in exchange for hitting that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Washington Commanders. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Washington Commanders Insider family as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it. We're talking about stopping the run, Commanders' new identity. And so if you have not got a chance to read this article, this is on ESPN.com. This is written by John Kain. And I think that he brings up some great points, and I think that these points really lead to the fact that this Washington Commanders defense is going to be much better than what a lot of people think, and I do think that they are going to be ready to stop the run. And also, too, I do think that they're going to be even better, actually, with their pass rush. And so let's go ahead and let's jump into what this article brought up. And so the first thing that they brought up was the obvious with the Washington Commanders, and that was the struggles that they had a season ago in 2024, talking about how the defense ranked 30th in rushing yards per game and 28th in yards per carry. And so that leads me to the first point, and we're talking about focus. And let's start with Dorrance Armstrong. And this is something that he said at the mandatory minicamp. And so he says this, if you can't stop the run, you can't win games. That's why our big focus this year is to be able to stop the run a lot better than we did last year. So I love that. I love that you're hearing that from Dorrance Armstrong and just what the focus is right now in mandatory minicamp. I think that this is something that really seems to be echoed by Joe Witt Jr. when he gets onto the podium and he was speaking with the press in his pressers at the mandatory minicamp. But I just love the fact that the emphasis has been there for the Washington Commanders, because this is going to be huge for this team to take a huge step forward. In fact, one of the things that's mentioned in this article is that it talks about that the Washington Commanders were the only team in the bottom 10 to reach the playoffs, and talking about how tough that was. And so that just lets you know that, look, if this Washington Commanders team can stop the run, they are going to be a tough out this upcoming season. And so next, they talk about what the Eagles were able to do against the Washington Commanders. And again, we get a chance to see where the focus is with the Washington Commanders this season so far. And so it talks about Saquon Barkley. And in his 3 games versus Washington, he ran for a combined 414 yards and 7 touchdowns, averaging 5.9 yards per carry. And the Eagles topped 200 yards rushing each time. And so that leads us to a quote from Joe Witt Jr. And he talks about, look, we didn't play the run well enough, and I thought we would have. And then he says some of the things we're doing with the front for the run game, we have changed, and some we have adjusted. So I love the fact that first we hear from Dorrance Armstrong about the focus and where they are with the mindset. And then you're hearing this from Coach Joe Witt Jr. about making the adjustments. And I think that that is signs to growth for this defense, the fact that they are already thinking about it, the fact that they're making the adjustments. And I think that because of the players that the Washington Commanders have added this season, I think from a scheme standpoint, it is going to connect a lot better for this defense. And that's something that we're getting ready to talk about here in a moment. And I think that that's something that's really undervalued, because I think that really the narrative out there has been, well, they didn't go get an elite pass rusher in the draft. They didn't go out and get Trey Hendrickson and blah, 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 blah. But really, I think a lot of people are just overlooking the fact that the players that have come in via free agency, and then also to the players that I think are going to be X factors, are players that I think that a lot of people are sleeping on here. And I think that this team is going to come together a lot better. And so that leads us to the next point here. and leading us into the fact that the Washington Commanders have beefed up this season. And so this is something that Coach Joe Wood Jr. had mentioned about the team getting bigger, talked about getting faster. He talked about the length and everything else. And so you love to hear that, because now that you're bigger, you've gotten a lot faster and the length is there. I expect for this scheme to really click over in year 2, because I think a lot of people are forgetting it was just year 1 of the program. And so you still have to turn, the team over to get the players in necessary to run the scheme to the peak. And so the fact that the Washington Commanders have beefed up, this is something that I think a lot of people are not counting on for the Commanders, but they talk about Javon Kinlaw, 6'5", 319. They talk about Eddie Goldman, who is rarely mentioned, 6'3", 320. I think he's got a lot of good football left with him. And then Dedrick Wise Jr., I love to hear him talk. It's very inspiring, but man, this is a guy that seems like he is locked in and committed to what he needs to do on the defensive end. He's 6'5", 280. And so talking about that beef here, that is going to help the Washington Commanders, because look, the Commanders allowed 3.18 yards before contact in 2024. And so it says that only two teams were worse here. And so that was, again, brought up in that ESPN article. And so one of the things that I like here when you're talking about just the size up front, and I just love the attention to detail that we're hearing from a guy like Dedrick Wise. And he talks about how, just being powerful, a strong individual, and just also too, the best thing is to push the ball carrier back to the guys. And he's talking about pushing them back inside. My main job is to set the edge. If I can push it back to those guys who are fast and physical and strong, we'll have a lot of plays being stopped. And so that right there, it just lets you know that that's a player that is locked in and he's playing for the next player, right? Because I think a lot of people look at these stats and things like that and think that defense is individual, and they think that stopping the run is an individual thing. No, it's a collective unit. And so that is something that we're hearing about this team. It just seems like they're more connected, not just on the offensive end, but defensively as well. And so hearing this from Dedrick Wise Jr. coming over, like, I'm definitely excited for him in this scheme fit. And so this is one of the reasons why I think that we should definitely feel comfortable here with this team moving forward. And I think that they're only going to get better. We have 40 days until we get into training camp. And so that's going to be huge. We'll hopefully get a chance to see, Javon Kinlaw. Obviously, he didn't participate in the mandatory mini camps, but man, I cannot wait to see this guy in pads flying around with this defense in Joe Witt Jr.'s program here. And I'm just hoping that what you're going to see in year 2 with the Washington Commanders is really what Coach Dan Quinn had with the Seahawks back in the day there. Like, it's just a group that it's so versatile, it's so fast, it has so much length that Joe Witt Jr. will be able to do what Cliff Kingsbury is going to do to defenses on the offensive end, because I think that he has so many interchangeable pieces that he's going to have defenses just trying to guess how can they stop the Commanders. But I think that with this type of versatility that Joe Witt Jr. has, I think he's going to be able to really confuse offenses that way. I think he's going to be able to send players in just multiple different packages and things like that. And so I just can't wait to see how versatile this defense is going to be here in year 2 under Joe Witt Jr. And so that leads us to the next portion here. And we're talking about 2 X factors. And I think that these guys are really overlooked and they could be huge for the Washington Commanders. And I think that really, if they show up this year, this could maybe give you the indication that the Commanders really did a great job as far as not necessarily going out there giving up draft capital for, an elite pass rusher, or going out there and giving up a lot for another veteran defensive player. And so I think that these 2 players are set to really have some good seasons for the Washington Commanders with Kain Medrano, and then also Jordan Magee. And so let's start with Jordan Magee, because I think that Jordan Magee, just based off what we're hearing from the mandatory minicamp, it sounds like he is definitely headed to a very good season. In fact, I love what Joe Witt Jr. had to say about him, and this is a tweet and then also to one of the quotes that was pulled from his presser, and that I do remember talking about this as well. But it says that we had a package that we wanted to run with him last year. With the knee injury, it has that in the quotations there. We weren't able to. We want to get more 3 linebacker packages versus nickel to shore up versus the run. He's had a great call command, and he's learned a lot from Bobby Wagner. And so I love to hear that. I love the fact that you have Joe Witt Jr. endorsing him, and it sounds like that they wanted to implement him last year. And yes, I mean, he did get injured. And so essentially he's coming into this year. It's almost like he's just, it's starting a new year for him. And just really, it's almost like he didn't necessarily play like last year because he just didn't get the chance to get out there into those packages and things like that. And so I think that, you're adding him now this year, hopefully healthy. It sounds like, or you heard it from Joe Witt Jr. saying that he, feels comfortable with the commands and things like that. And I think that he got a chance to get even more comfortable during the mandatory minicamp because Bobby Wagner did miss a day. And I'm sure they probably threw him out there to just really see what he could do and just build that confidence. And so I think the confidence is there. I think that we got a chance to see, from a physical standpoint at 6'3", 226, this is a guy that will get downhill and be physical. It's just a matter of, can he stay healthy? And so look, if he stays healthy, you better believe that is certainly going to help the run defense here. And so I can't wait to see what he's going to do. And then you hear just what, Joe Witt Jr. was thinking about him with these packages last season. Imagine him being healthy this year. He's going to be an added bonus, and he could really be one of the reasons why the Washington Commanders felt comfortable by not going out and getting a whole bunch of other veteran free agents or going out and trading for them. And so next, I think another player that really could be slept on this season and might be an X factor here as far as not only helping to stop the run, but also too in pass coverage as well. And that's going to be Kain Medrano. I think that not a lot of people were talking about him as much. And I think that when you go back and you look at his tape from UCLA, you see a guy that is quick. You see a guy that's very fluid. I always love to see his interceptions and things like that and the way that he's able to break on the football. And so I think that immediately he is going to help the Washington Commanders when they start to get into passing downs and things like that. My biggest question for Kain Medrano is the physicality. Like once they start to put the pads on and things like that, he could really take a leap if he shows that he can be a guy that is willing to get downhill in the box and attack the run and things like that. Because I think that now when you're talking about changing out different linebackers and throwing out different types of, just schemes and stuff like that at these offenses and mixing it up, like I think that could definitely take an added dimension for the defense here, because now with his speed and just his like physical tools to like pick off the ball and stuff like that, like I could really see his athleticism show if he gets a chance to play here. And I love the fact that I'm hearing, or at least seeing, that he has just been a sponge since he's been in camp and everything else. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. Do you feel like that, yes, Kain Medrano and Jordan Magee could really be a huge defensive impact for this team this season, helping the run? And then also too, like I said, with Kain Medrano, I think he's going to be terrific in the passing game. And then next, let me know what you guys are thinking here as far as the Washington Commanders beefing up here, because like I said before, this sounds like a team that is much more confident and together defensively so far. And I just think that a lot of people out there are sleeping on the fact that this team now has the right players in position to really run this scheme to the peak. And so I cannot wait to see what you are going to see from these players out there this year. So you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking here. And so look, as we always say, go Commanders, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.